Holy crap, we're live.
Yes, we are.
It works.
Yes. And thank you for joining us in Legends of Tabletop this wonderful evening. Would you care to introduce yourself?
I am Peter Rawlik, alcoholic. And this is my dog. Writer, editor, gamer when I have the spare time, dabbler in comic book history and madness, and all around crazy guy. Crazy guy.
Wild and crazy guy.
That's right.
So, what have you been working on recently?
For the last, 2 years, I have been working on a sequel to my novel Reanimatrix. Reanimatrix dealt with my one character, Robert Peasley, discovering a dead body of a girl he knows in Arkham, and picking up her murder case, and moving into her house and falling in love with her memory. The problem is when she turns up alive again, how does that play out? It's a kind of homage to the movie Laura, directed by Otto Preminger. But this is Arkham, so dead people aren't quite always dead. So that was Reanimatrix. The sequel is titled The Eldritch Equations and Other Cases, because Robert and Megan have gotten together and they have opened up with their third partner a detective agency in Arkham. And their first major case is the serial murder of mathematics students at Miskatonic University.
My goodness, I can think of that wonderfully tying in with another classic tale that we all know and love.
Yes, and that's exactly what it does. Somebody is killing Professor Upham's students one by one, and the cops think it's they're all accidents, but Frank Elwood, he's a mathematician, so he's like, wait, the probabilities of this aren't likely. And he uses the term, it's a probability of murder. If all these people are dying in my class, that it just doesn't happen. So he seeks out professional help. And it bridges the gap between Reanimatrix and the Weird Company. So, it sets up both Elwood and Asnith Waite for the parts they will play in the Weird Company.
Okay.
So, equal to Reanimatrix and a prequel to the Weird Company.
So that's where it fits in the timeline.
Yes. Yes. And if you think that I'm just shoving this in to make it fit, I will throw you back to the closing epilogue of Reanimators, where I say that Robert Peasley and his wife, Megan Halsey, are missing. I have been planning this from the beginning.
Okay.
I've always wanted to take these two characters this place, and I know a lot of people have wanted to see these characters do this, and this also sets up for another book in the series, which will essentially be the return of the Weird Company. In one last adventure. They have time for one last adventure before they all die. So we're going to pull that off. So that's the big thing I've been working on. The other things that I've been working on is a collection of short stories, reprints of all my work. Well, not all my work, some of my work from Hinam and Gahana, or Gahana and Himnan, sorry. And that is going to be called Strange Company, which is a riff off of my story, The Strange Company, but also there was a publisher called The Strange Company that published a lot of weird fiction in the Midwest in the 70s and 80s, I think. So a little homage there. We've dug through all my stuff and we divided it into 3 sections. There's my straight mythos tales. There's a section of tales that are set in alternate worlds, like steampunk or a world where the undead took over. And then there's a section of non-mythos stuff. Some of my early works, On the Far Side of the Apocalypse, a few other tales like that. A little science fiction, a little fantasy, a little horror. I think there's a story about werewolves in there called The Bitch.
Nice.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It's Annabelle and the Bitch. So,
okay.
Riff on Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's that. I just counted up these today. I have 10 stories waiting to be published, 3 poems waiting to be published, 3 stories waiting for approval, and I have an entire an anthology that I have edited, waiting to be published. It's early in production, so we'll probably see it in 2019. Called The Chromatic Court.
Yes, tell me more about that.
That grew out. So that grew out of an idea where a couple of years ago, and as part of Reanimatrix, I wrote this story called The Sepia Prince, which sort of postulated that, okay, there's the King in Yellow, but maybe there are other avatars of great old ones out there that have assumed colors and titles and arts to their own name. So the Sepia Prince is kind of like the avatar for Cthulhu and opera. And I just wrote that and I included it in the book, and I really liked that idea, but it was a throwaway. But somebody else came forward, Micah Harris, and said, "Why don't you do an entire anthology on that idea?" And I want to write a story. So we put out a call for stories, and oh my God, we read hundreds of stories, and we got it down to like 25 that we really loved, and then we had to cut that down to like 10.
Oh.
And it has been just a labor of love to do this, but also very difficult to tell somebody that I love your story, but I have to cut it. And years ago, someone sent me a rejection notice and said, "Hey, look, I love your story, but I can't make it work with everything else that's in the book. It just doesn't fit." And I didn't understand that. And then I did this anthology, and I got a whole bunch of modern day stories. I only got one story that was set in a fantasy world. And it just, it was a good story, and I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to do something with it, but it just didn't fit the tone of the rest of the book. So I had to, I had to explain that, and the person understood. And there was a lot of that doing with this book. Some stories just didn't work, even though they were good stories. They didn't work with the rest of the collection. So.
And I have asked about that in previous interviews, not only just with you, but with others. And how do you cope either with rejection or rejecting others? Because
I hate rejection. I can't
doesn't?
stand it. No. But, well, rejection is hard. As an author, rejection is really hard. But then what has helped me understand that is doing it from the other end, having to reject things and developing a thick skin in both directions, and understanding that often when you get rejected, it's not because the story wasn't any good. It's because it didn't fit with the theme, or it didn't fit the motif that emerged. And, okay, so you didn't make it into this anthology, but congratulations. You've got a story that you can now shop around.
Yep.
This is, I just mentioned that I have 10 stories waiting to be published and 3 waiting for approval. I don't have any. I have only one story sitting out there that I can go to submit to something if it comes up.
Okay.
I don't like that. I want to have 5 or 6 stories.
How do you stoke that creative fire? Because that's the one thing that I am stuck on. Like, I know I can because I've done that twice, but I mean, I finding the ignition
Yep.
to generate that fire, to create, and generating it at will, I am having difficulty.
So I drink a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. I go to some part of the country where weed is legal at least once every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I do that a lot, but in Portland, it's almost, you walk down the street and you get a contact high. There's just no other way. There's nothing around it, and that does help a little. But sometimes it's just, I see the weirdest things, and I have a little black book that I write ideas down in that I can then go back and mine for stories when I need to. I'll give you an example. One of my daughters has just learned to knit. Her grandmother has taught her to knit. Mm-hmm. And she worked on this piece for about 2 weeks, and Grammy looked at it and said, "Oh, look, your knitting has gotten so much better. This stuff at the top, these loops are awful, but down here they're nice and tight and even. So why don't we take this apart and start all over?" And my daughter agreed. And what took her 2 weeks only took her 2 days. Now that she's back in. But in that conversation, the word was used. The word tink was used. Mm-hmm. And I was like, "What the hell's tink?" And it's knit spelled backwards. Mm-hmm. And it's the process of taking something knitted apart so that you can reuse the yarn. And now I want to write a story about an industry, in a post-apocalyptic industry, that is taking manufactured knitwear mm-hmm. and tinking it for raw materials.
That happens.
But think about the world that would have to be so I'm building in my head this whole world where tinking mm-hmm. is a profession. And and I have to think about the famous book, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Yeah.
With a completely different meaning for the word tink.
Yes.
And so, this is all going into the little black book, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Okay.
But someday I'll come back to it when it gels and somebody says, "Well, we're doing this whole, yarn anthology." I'm like, "Oh, well, I know something about that."
Yes.
It's not much, but I know something about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, the whole idea that, and maybe the idea of sewing something is a magical process, mm-hmm. and binding magic and spells into something. So maybe tinking is the reverse.
It could be.
Something. I mean, that would be an interesting idea. But this is the process of going through and thinking about things in a different manner, and then just writing them down. And not everything's going to gel. Not everything's going to lead to a story, but you build up that black book and you have it to go to when you need an idea.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway, yes, that's how I do that. That's how I recharge the batteries and find the interesting ideas. I see them all around me.
Yeah. That, man, now you're starting to talk about yarn. It makes me think about the standard 4-ply and 2-ply, and again, with your tinking, the repurposed saris, the ends of the mill to make the silk, those mill ends are often used to be woven back into yarn and then sold as sari yarn. So that's about the knowledge that I hold regarding tinking and
thinking. Yeah, I had never heard of it before this week, but now I'm sort of fascinated by the idea.
Yeah.
I've read in the past a whole bunch of stories about. I can remember there was a story, I think in Asimov or Fantasy and Science Fiction, about making honey and having honey draw from the honeybees, making honey as a competition, and having the honeybees cheat by drawing their nectar from nightshade plants or poppies. So that, the honey's good, but it's also a little bit of a narcotic.
Yes.
We all know that there's stories about wood carving where it's magical. And I know that there's some brewing stories about magical brews.
Yes, Robert Louis Stevenson with his Red Heather ale.
Yes. And any of these sort of quasi-mystical art forms where, it's not just a science, it's also an art. Sacred herbal, and yes.
Yeah.
Beers. Yeah, exactly. Beer brewing as magic.
Yes. Because an evening is not quite so nice without a glass.
Yeah. And of course, the idea of weaving something with, whether it be Rumpelstiltskin or any of these other things that, these stories that we go back, that's very magical. So this is the first time I've ever seen an idea about undoing that. Yeah, so I might actually end up doing it. I don't know when, but I might do it. I might do it under a different name because I sort of branded Pete Rawlik as the Mythos guy and need to do something else under a different name. So, yeah.
Yeah, now is not a time for me to sit there and try to draw anagrams. Oh, man. What was I going to say? I need to come up with, not to impose with personal stuff, but I need to come up with a day and a night version of beer flavors competition.
Yeah.
I'm doing a light and a dark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the beer that I go out and have at lunch is very different from the beer that I want at nighttime. And I want a light fruity beer at lunch, and I want something darker, heavier, with a little bit more kick in the evening.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Quite true. Oh God, I was going to ask something about when will we expect to see the chromatic cord?
It's in early production now. I think they're just starting to work on art, so I'm thinking 2019 sometime. It'll be a while. This is the thing that I've learned the hard way, is that just because you finish writing the story or picking the stories, that doesn't mean it just goes into the computer and they spit out pages and they bind it and it's done. No, you've got to edit and format. And
Yes.
I, the one thing I suddenly gotten into is book design.
Mm,
Book design and layout was something I never even thought about. I thought you just picked the font and justified everything one way and it was
no.
done. No, you gotta pick the font and make sure it works with the larger fonts and the smaller fonts.
Oh,
Does it
yes.
does it work with the page number? Does it work with the paper you've picked?
Mhm.
Oh my, is it easy to read? Is it conveying the right feeling? Do the header fonts convey the right feeling? What?
Yeah. Speaking of book formatting, I just wanted to remind everyone that Chaosium has relaunched their fiction line, I believe. Um,
Yes.
yeah, James Lauder has joined them, and I'm very excited to see what they come up with, as I have appreciated the output that he has generated in the past.
Yeah. I
A
kind
great
of
deal.
I'm looking forward to where Chaosium goes. Um, I had to say that I grew up collecting the Chaosium books, the
Mhm.
fiction books, and the Call of Cthulhu stuff, and it was never a bigger thrill than to see my name in a Chaosium collection.
That would be awesome.
And then I got to edit a Chaosium collection.
Hmm.
So yes, thrilled, happy to see that they're back, and
Yes.
I've got some time off from work, and I don't have any projects on the horizon, so I might chew my ideas and send Louder a note about
I'm sure
something.
he would appreciate it.
I don't know what yet, but I just yeah, it's it. You gotta see what's out there.
Absolutely. I know that I too need to get off my own rump and work on some things that I've kind of started, the
Mhm.
generation of that fire to complete it. It started and then it just kind of sputters.
Yeah, and that's I have that problem. I start projects and I have a hard, this. I just finished yesterday writing a story for Golden Goblin Press.
Mhm.
At least I hope that's where it's going to go. Um, but where that story should have taken me a week or two, it probably took me 4 months. And part of that is because I'm a little distracted by the world right now.
Who isn't?
And, and yeah. And but what I ended up doing was I ended up plugging away at it a little bit every day.
Yeah.
Even if it was just a paragraph, got something on the page, and then okay, said okay, that's what I'm going to do today, and I went off and worked on something that has absolutely no chance of being published. It's just a game I'm playing in my head.
That's kind of what I did do when I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be mechanical and rigid about this. I'm going to dedicate 500 words a day. I'm going to generate 500 words a day, and so that 500 words a day gradually devolved into just straight up stream of consciousness crap.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like,
and that happens. It
yeah,
happens, but it's 500 words that you didn't have before,
true.
and Joe Pulver says that 500 words is that are crap are better than 0 words that are good. So, or something to that effect. You can always work with something that you have on the page. If you
Yes,
have nothing on the page, you have nothing to work with.
true.
So, so yes, Dennis, I know you're out there. Quit screaming at me through social media and write another book. Damn it, so
Yes. Okay.
Dennis. So
Hmm.
yeah, but no, seriously, that is that is the best advice I can give anybody. Is write, write, and write. And once you've
Absolutely.
written, you know, rewrite. But also the other things that you need to consider is that, do what you say you were going to do.
Mhm.
If you promise somebody a 5,000 word vampire story by January 1st,
Mhm.
and you deliver a 10,000 word werewolf story
Ah,
in
yeah.
March,
Mhm.
chances are you're not going to get published.
True.
And
True.
chances are that editor's not going to send you more work.
Mhm.
So yeah, do what you said you were going to do
Mhm.
is probably the best advice I can give.
Yes.
You will not believe the amount of work I have gotten based on the fact that some editor has called me up and said, this guy didn't deliver. I needed this story in this kind of story with this word count in 5 days.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, but I need, that's going to kill me for the rest of the week. I'm going to need this much. And they're like, yes, because we need the filler. We need something to put into that spot. And is it the best work I've ever done? No. Is it bad work? No, it's good work. It's just not great work. But you know what? It pays the bills and it's published. And I got paid for it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, doing what you said you would do is a big, big part of this business. It might be
Okay.
the biggest part of the business. You can do a lot with a modicum of talent, and just a adherence to deadlines and goals.
Okay. Words that some of the lesser motivated among us always need to hear. Yes.
And
Ah,
the flip side of that is that means that you don't get to go out and play Call of Cthulhu every Friday night.
yeah. Which I do miss the weekly Call of Cthulhu games.
Yes.
And that's okay.
If you are going to be a producer of content, it is very hard to be a regular consumer of content.
Yes.
Because you really should be writing.
Yes.
And I'm at this age where if I go out at 9 o'clock and start a game at 10,
Mm-hmm.
and that game ends at 4,
Yes.
I am wrecked for the whole rest of the day. I can't write. You actually do have to have some mental cognizance,
Yes.
to write. It's just like can't just pound your head against the keys and expect things to come out. I mean, that does work every once in a while, but
very rarely.
Very rarely. Very rarely. So yeah, being
nothing good comes from it anyway.
No.
I've managed
certainly not at my age.
Generate a little bit, but nothing lasting at all.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
What else am I doing? I don't know what else I'm doing.
What else are you doing?
I'm about to take some time off.
You are? What are you going to do?
I'm going to go get surgery done.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I hope it's good.
It's minor.
Yes.
It's minor surgery, but okay. Back in October I caught pneumonia and I coughed myself into an umbilical hernia. So I'm going to go get that sewn up. But that's going to take me 10 days.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's not fun. But I have a whole stack of books ready to read. And
nice.
So that's what I'm going to do.
What's your reading list? Share it with me right now.
So right now, probably at the top of my list is the new Centipede Press, Caitlin Kiernan's Lovecraftian retrospect. I walked into a library sale the other day, and they had every Doug Preston and Lincoln Child book for $1 a piece.
Nice.
So I have the Relic and Reliquary and a few
Mhm.
others, but now I just filled in the rest of the collection, so I've got stacks and stacks of that.
Nice.
I got Ruth Ann Emers's Winter Tide. I have to
Mhm.
read Richard Lee Byers' Hepcats of Ulthar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is, Byers is always fun. Um, Both James Lovegrove and Lois Gresh are doing separate Cthulhu versus Sherlock Holmes series. So I've got 4 of those to read right now.
Uh,
So yeah, what I'm actually going to pick up and read, I don't know. I'm 3/4 of the way through the Lovecraft middle school books. I bought them for my daughter, but it turns out they're actually halfway decent. So I'm reading those. Um, uh, I'm going back in time and reading comic books that I read when I was a kid and
Mhm.
still have, and making sure that this still is quality stuff that I like. Things like Adam Warlock,
Mhm.
um, Dreadstar, the Micronaut series, uh, Grendel, Warlock 5, which they just rebooted. A company bought it and has remade it.
Mhm.
Um, Mage is still running. I'm trying to, as a new limited series, I'm trying to catch up so that I can remember where everything's going. Um, I'm rereading Sandman from
Oh,
start to finish,
nice.
and but it used to be in little comic books, and now I've got these giant volumes that can be used as weapons, uh,
Yes.
or armor, depending on what you're in the mood for. So
Yeah.
it's if you're reading the book like this and you drop it, it can actually hurt you at this point.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Man, I think the last graphic novel, the compendium, the hardcover compendiums, um, big collections. I don't remember what they're called,
okay.
but I think they're compendiums. But the Nameless one, I finally picked that up, the
Oh yeah,
Grant
the Nameless
Morrison
is good.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that. That was fun. A Lovecraftian book that doesn't name
You
drop
okay?
Lovecraftian. Yeah, my feet are cramping up for some reason,
Oh,
so I'm trying to stretch them out as we sit here.
okay.
Um, no big deal.
Okay. As I was
Um,
going to say, if you need to take a break, I
no,
can
no,
sit
no.
here and talk
Oh,
about Bird's Coffee Company.
Birds
There's a
coffee.
there's a brew for every birdie, and you can migrate the flock on down to
Is this your sponsor?
birdscoffee.com. Yes,
Okay, Birds Coffee Company.
yes,
It's amazing how much coffee and gaming goes together these days.
absolutely.
I'm really surprised.
Well, not only coffee, but beer goes with gaming
Yes,
very well.
yeah. Well, when I was a kid and Dungeons and Dragons started, I was a kid, so the best we could have was a Coke and or
Mm-hmm.
Pepsi. And then as I moved into college, we got Jolt, with Jolt Cola.
Ooh.
Right? It was just like all the caffeine and twice the sugar or something like that.
Oh, yes.
But now, gaming and is an adult business,
Mhm.
and so it's not surprising to me that coffee and alcohol
Mhm.
have come a long way to catch up with gamers. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, in fact, I have a bottle of that Lovecraft whiskey that the Lovecraft Brewery put out.
Oh, oh man.
Narragansett.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bottle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I haven't opened it yet, but I have a bottle.
Oh man, that is going to be wonderful. But speaking of coffee, you can find your very own package of Legends of Tabletop coffee. It's brewed by the Game Master Legend Zone Game Master Neil, the owner and roaster at Birds of a Feather Coffee Company. And you can find that at birdscoffeecompany.com/coffees/Legends of Tabletop Legendary Brew, or you can just go to legendsoftabletop.com. At the top of the page, it's got its very own link. It says Legends of Tabletop Coffee right there, and it's wonderful. It says coffee to fuel all the marathon gaming sessions. The Legendary Brew is a smooth, easy drinking medium roast. You can keep going back for cup after cup, and best yet, a portion of the proceeds goes directly to the Legends of Tabletop Gaming and Podcast Network to help them continue to deliver hours of entertainment every week for free. And so I hope that gave you enough time to get your feet taken care of.
No, they're cramped up. They're cramped up good, but I'm just gonna keep stretching them out.
Okay.
So if you see
push on through. I don't want to watch you wince in pain.
No, it's okay.
All right.
I'll solve that problem.
Okay.
The dog is. I was laying on the floor so that the dog would have some company. And now he's sound asleep.
Oh, good.
So
you're going to quietly move across the room.
Walk across the room and sit down at the table.
Okay.
And make little fists with my feet.
Okay. I hope they stretch out somehow.
I think so too. Otherwise, I'm just going to take a hammer and a nail.
No.
So, what else? I don't know. I mean, isn't that enough? Isn't a novel, a collection, an anthology, and 10 short stories enough?
Never.
And see, and this is the problem with writers, because you finish something, you produce it, you hand it to the publisher or you hand it to the audience, and they read it and they say, hey, that was great. What else you got?
Yes.
And you're like, how about I don't have a life? How about I haven't seen my kids, in daylight for 3 months? There's got to be a balance, but writers are driven sort of to constantly produce, and it may not always be the best thing for us.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to recharge, and sometimes we actually have to stop and look back and read what's in the genre. And read stuff that's outside the genre, so we can recharge and find new ideas and get new perspectives and see what other people are doing with their writing and literature and and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I just really need to sit down and take a day and do 12 loads of laundry. Yeah.
I understand that one completely.
Yeah. Laundry is important.
The never-ending chore.
It is, and I have seen too many people who have forgotten to do their laundry.
Oh no.
Yes, mostly at cons, but yes, it helps. I recently went to a local film festival.
Yeah.
Negative Fest.
How did that play out?
It was interesting. I saw a movie that was really well acted and directed and horrific, and I never want to see it again.
What was it?
It was called Trauma. Okay. And it is set in Chile, and it is about 3 women who take a trip to get away in the woods.
Okay, that doesn't work well for anybody.
No, I don't know why people go to the woods in the first place. It never works out.
It's great there.
No.
The woods are great.
No. Oh. She dies, everybody dies.
Oh.
Yes. And it's just 2 hours of horrific bloodbaths and torture. It's a really good film, but it's just not to my taste. Other films like there was a film called Bloodfest.
But that one was okay.
Well, it's a horror comedy.
Okay.
It's about kids who go to the greatest horror convention on the planet. And they go into the festival grounds and the gates are shut behind them, and the chainsaws come out.
Okay.
And there's Clownland and the graveyard, and there's vampires.
All the little tropes, yes.
Yes, and it's done as a comedy, but it's done really, really well.
Okay.
Watched a movie out of Germany, I think, called Snowflake, which didn't just break the fourth wall; it broke all the walls. Literally, the villains of the film get a copy of the script.
Okay.
And the script is being written by somebody in the film. So they can read what's going on and what's going to happen. And they can influence what's going to happen by having the script rewritten. Very interesting idea. Mm-hmm. And I think well executed. I would recommend it to other people. I might not sit through it again because it is in multiple languages. So one of the things I love is when you're reading subtitles, but you know the language that's being spoken.
Oh.
And it's not quite right.
Okay.
Or there's not only subtitles but it's also been dubbed, and the two don't match.
Yes.
Because they're done by two different sets of people. So that's kind of unsettling for me to try and figure out. Well, he said this, but then the subtitle said this, and that's sort of which is right because they sort of mean two different things.
Yeah.
Different impacts.
I get that, what you're saying about translation, because, specifically W.G. Sebald, I've read two different translated works by him, one done by the gentleman that did the Rings of Saturn, the translator that did that, and then another by someone else, and it just didn't have that same voice to it. And then went back and read another item by the same translator that did Rings of Saturn, and then it clicked, and I enjoyed that work. So there you go. I get what you're saying about translations in that manner. So.
Yeah, and so this movie was good. I kind of got it, and it was enjoyable. It was sort of, I'm not really sure it was a horror film. I think more of a dark fantasy. But it was, and it's an interesting idea. Those were the highlights. There was a lot of short films that I kind of enjoyed. I think there was a movie called it wasn't called Insomnia. I think it was called a Short Walk or something like that, about a guy who can't sleep, so he goes for a walk and he's constantly on his phone, and just out of the corner of his eye he keeps seeing things. Until he realizes that he thinks he's just hallucinating. So, but he finally starts to panic and run. Yeah, it's a good little film.
Okay.
I gotta sneeze.
Oh no! Bless you in advance.
Thank you.
All right.
So that's what I've been kind of doing. Working on a secret project with our friend Sal.
Really?
Yes.
Awesome.
We're gonna see. I did the general outline and idea, and he's handling the day-to-day writing, and we'll see what that does.
Okay.
And
I may have to harass him about that.
Yeah, do so.
Okay. Especially now that it's summer.
Yes. And Sal, our friend Sal, works at a comic book store, so like every week he brings me a stack of comics and says, "Here, shove those into my face and says, read these." And I'm like, consume, 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 and please, I'm really into binge watching now because I'd rather
Oh
when I
no.
get a 4 hour block where I need to stop writing, I can then just watch, I don't know, Jessica Jones or Midsummer Murders or Luke Cage or Death in Paradise, and just enjoy that and not have to worry about catching up with the next episode when it's available.
See, that's something that has eluded me. I mean, there's a television behind me, a large television downstairs, but I never watch them.
No. Yeah.
It's just I'd rather read something
So
and look at something. So
the weird thing is that when I was starting to write, I would do it on a laptop in a coffee bar. And this is before we had Starbucks. So I would sit at a coffee bar at the bar and work on the laptop writing with a band playing 3 feet away, conversation and orders being thrown around all around me. So I sort of like this idea of having noise that I can tune in and out as I write.
That's I get that because that kind of strikes me occasionally if you're in a group, and then it's just like this narration faucet is turned on.
Right. So I can't go to coffee bars as much as I used to, because I'm not single and fluid with cash anymore. But I can sit at my desk and have the TV on and listen or watch something that I've seen 3 or 4 times. I know how it's going to end. I don't need to pay that much attention to it.
Yeah.
But it provides a modicum of noise to cancel out whatever else is going on in the house. It provides a little bit of distraction, and I will change what I watch based on what I'm writing. If I'm writing a mystery, I'll watch a classic mystery. Or if I'm writing dialogue, I'll write something with good dialogue. I'll watch something with good dialogue. So if you're reading a book and it's just like, hey, this patter sounds just like something out of Nero Wolfe, chances are I was watching Nero Wolfe. And I have accidentally typed the name Barnaby into my story. And no, I am not writing a Midsummer Murders story. But yeah, damn it, he was on. So yes, that's why I have to go back and reread my stuff.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while, what I'm watching creeps in a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that is kind of a stickler for me is that I have to read it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Many times it's like, okay, that's the interruption in the flow. I've got to fix it, over and over and over.
Yeah, and reading out loud is a great tool. It's something more writers should practice. So
I hope so, because I've sat in on workshops and people set up and start to read what they've created, and it just
you can see the stumbling block. Right?
Yeah,
you can see where that they didn't really think this out.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be a good idea. It's just on paper and then in speech, they're 2 different things.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and there is some poetry. When I grew up, I was taught that poetry is meant to be spoken.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I entirely agree with that.
Okay.
There's a lot of poetry that is meant to be spoken. There's a lot of poetry that's very lyrical.
Yes.
And there's a lot of spoken word stuff by William S. Burroughs and Laurie Anderson that really just flows as a spoken word. But then you get into things like E. E. Cummings and Daniel Zazowski, House of Leaves, where the text is designed to be on the page.
Okay.
And it's not designed, it's not necessarily meant to be read aloud.
Okay.
And there's some wordplay that works on the page, but because the words are synonyms,
Mm-hmm.
you will never be able to express that
Aloud
aloud.
versus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can say the word arrival. That means, someone arriving.
I have arrived.
I have arrived, right? But if you write on the page the word arrival,
Rival.
parentheses R, close parentheses, rival. So it's a rival.
Yes.
That means someone who's opposing you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, also implying that that person has just arrived. You can't do, it's very hard to explain that without seeing it on the page.
Yes.
So, these are literary tricks and poetry tricks and that are designed specifically for the medium that they're being expressed in, not necessarily the written word. Yeah. So yes, and this came to the forefront because the one piece that I have that's sitting out there that I can't find any place does a lot of this, a lot of that kind of wordplay, that just hasn't found a home yet. Not that I've sent it to anybody, but it just hasn't found a home yet.
Okay.
It was Michael Sisko did a reading of his novel Unlanguage.
Oh gosh, yes.
About 4 years ago at the Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, and that inspired a little bit of avant-garde wordplay in my head, and I think it's a good piece. I just don't know what to do with it.
Okay.
So, but yes, wordplay can be fun on the page as opposed to in the spoken word.
That's true. That's true. And I've just been attacking it from spoken and on the page, but not just strictly to one format or the other.
Right.
And I kind of limited myself that way, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway.
The place I think that's for me where you see that the most is like the word Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
You look at that word on the page and you're like, how the hell do I say that?
Yes. And there was a segment of Lovecraft Easing podcasts about the correct pronunciation of Lovecraftian gods, and I greatly appreciated that one. So, I mean, a great deal of our vocabularies, our individual vocabularies, are generated in silence by reading to oneself, and just knowing how they're correctly pronounced. I mean, for me, that was a great help in being able to express myself fully and verbally.
Yes. So growing up, it wasn't until I was in college that I discovered that the word Ari was pronounced awry.
Yes.
Because nobody in my community ever used the word awry, and I only read it.
Oh.
So yes, until you hear, for some of these, even in English and German and French, until you hear somebody else speak this word, you don't know how it sounds.
Yes.
There are lots of words like that.
Okay. Well, Kate, I was just going to say, how are you feeling?
How am I feeling?
Yeah, how are you feeling? Because I was just going to say, I appreciate you taking your the time out of your Friday evening to speak with me over here at Legends of Tabletop, and I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I thank you for having me. It's been a while since I've been on. I'm feeling a little anxious, man. You know, feeling not at ease. You know, the quote from Grosse Point Blank. Um, but this we live in a very strange and unsettling world right now,
Yes.
and I'm having to find a new way to find a new place of stability and new coping mechanisms to make things work.
Yes.
And there's a Chinese curse that says, "May you live in interesting times."
Oh gosh.
And that, I would much rather not live in interesting times. I would much rather live in stable and serene times.
Mm-hmm.
It may be boring, but kind of like boring.
Kind of know what's going to happen.
I want to wake up every day and know that we're not at war. Yeah.
Yes, and with that, I am going to close this interview with a thank you very much for your time, and in order to stay in touch with what's going on over here at Legends of Tabletop, if you like what you hear and like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, thank you.